Biden missed? U.S. miscalculation. The consequences of Pelosi's visit to Taiwan will be felt by the whole world. Although the formal results of the visit of Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan looked dull, the very fact of the trip was an extraordinary event and attracted the attention of the whole world. Moreover, this voyage became the trigger for the fourth crisis in the Taiwan Strait since 1949. This crisis will have much more serious consequences than all the previous ones, says Vasily Kashin, director of the Center for Comprehensive European and International Studies at the National Research University Higher School of Economics, in the pages of the Profile magazine. All past crises in the Taiwan Strait, 1954 to 1955, 1958 and 1995 to 1996, were quite protracted, from 3 to more than 8 months. Moreover, the escalation during these periods was on the rise and was controlled by the PRC authorities. During crises, the leadership of mainland China pursued its pragmatic domestic and foreign policy goals, which were achieved in whole or in part. The first and second crises were bloody. They were accompanied by real fighting in the strait, and the losses of each side were in the hundreds. Washington then seriously considered the possibility of using nuclear weapons against China. The third crisis developed against the backdrop of a generally constructive atmosphere in U.S.-China relations. It was bloodless. The toughest actions on the part of the PRC were the firing of ballistic missiles into the water areas adjacent to the most important Taiwanese port of Kaohsiung. This, however, was enough to cause short-term panic, stock market fluctuations and capital flight. The military demonstration made a significant impact on Taiwanese public opinion, greatly reducing support for open separatism. During the third crisis, Beijing drew red lines on Taiwan's status, which were followed for a long time by both the United States and the Taiwanese themselves. A correct interpretation of Beijing's actions in the framework of such crises is impossible without a good knowledge of the history of China's foreign policy and, in particular, China's behavior during local conflicts. The profound comments circulating in Russian social networks about the fact that one or another side leaked or outplayed an opponent during Pelosi's visit cannot even be called erroneous. They simply have nothing to do with reality. Their authors might as well describe the relationship between the fairy tale kingdoms of dwarves and hobbits in Tolkien's world of Middle-earth. We are now in the early phase of a months-long military and political escalation involving the PRC, Taiwan, and the United States, which will gradually begin to involve third parties, such as Japan. The process will be accompanied by the widespread use of means of economic warfare. Unlike the third crisis, the fourth one will develop against the backdrop of an openly confrontational U.S.-China relationship, which makes it especially dangerous. To all appearances, the current crisis was the result of Washington's strategic miscalculation. Thinking about the visit of Pelosi in the spring of 2022, the Americans expected to click on the nose of China and its leader Xi Jinping ahead of the 20th Communist Party Congress scheduled for October. The Americans, apparently, initially did not expect too much backlash. In 1997, Taiwan was visited by the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives Newt Gingrich, and the PRC then limited itself to verbal protests. The Americans also probably assumed that Beijing would not dare to take risky steps in the year when the Party Congress is due to take place. The CCP leadership always tries to make sure that nothing overshadows such events, and that the Chinese economy continues to suffer from COVID restrictions. Pelosi's trip seemed to the Americans an easy way to win a diplomatic victory and strengthen the authority of the United States in the region. However, China's reaction to Pelosi's first attempt to visit Taiwan in April 2022 was unexpectedly harsh. China issued direct military threats. Instead of an easy victory, the United States faced an unpleasant prospect, in addition to the Ukrainian one, of getting another military political crisis. As a result, it was announced, Pelosi caught the coronavirus, and her trip to Taiwan is postponed. This, however, did not mean that the visit was cancelled altogether. After direct threats from Beijing, refusing to voyage would have looked like a sign of weakness. The White House tried to smooth the situation by distancing itself from the speaker's visit and presenting it as a personal initiative of an ambitious politician who decided to leave a mark on history at the end of his career. In its extreme form, it looked like Pelosi, out of empty vanity and stubbornness, refused to heed the persuasion of the entire administration, including Biden personally, who asked her not to go. This information, with reference to anonymous sources, was broadcast through the media and the expert community. It is possible that Pelosi's personality did indeed play a key role in the development of the crisis. The problem, however, is that there is no reliable evidence for this version. Newt Gingrich, who visited Taiwan in 1997, represented the Republican Party, then in opposition to Bill Clinton's Democratic administration. Gingrich was also known to be a longtime supporter of Taiwan. In other words, there was no particular doubt that, having gone to the island, he worked out his agenda, and did not carry out the task of the White House. Pelosi is one of the pillars of the ruling Democratic Party. The White House did not make any public statements condemning or criticizing her visit. It was only about her right to go to Taiwan and about the immutability of U.S. policy towards China. The internal American cuisine in these conditions does not matter. The only thing that matters is that Beijing sees in the visit a deliberate provocation on the part of the United States, which is impossible not to respond. Military political crises with Chinese participation, as a rule, are long-term. At present, a gradual increase in economic pressure measures has begun. China has already stopped supplying natural sand to the island and banned the import of Taiwanese citrus fruits and fish. Obviously, this is just the beginning. From the history of China's conflicts with other countries, it is known that most of the sanctions imposed by Beijing are informal and unannounced. It's just that suddenly a certain class of goods from a country punished by China has problems with customs clearance. Endless fire, sanitation, and tax inspections begin at her businesses in China. Minor violations that would not have paid attention before are punished to the fullest extent. Already approved cooperation agreements are suddenly cancelled, contracts are terminated, etc. In parallel, there is an escalation in the military sphere. In 1995 to 1996, China periodically conducted ballistic missile practice launches in areas near Taiwanese ports, disrupting logistics and causing panic. The response to Pelosi's visit was an unprecedented scale exercise with real shootings in 6 areas around the island's perimeter. Of course, these maneuvers interfere with the movement of sea and air transport. The exercise zones are likely to gradually expand, bringing the situation closer to a complete blockade of the island. The drills will gradually deplete the resources of the Taiwanese military, which will have to be constantly on high alert, often going on alert. This leads to fatigue of personnel, increased wear and tear of equipment and accidents. China, which has a 2 million-strong army, will be able to regularly rotate its troops. Taiwan, with its small armed forces, will find it much more difficult to do this. A protracted crisis will be accompanied by capital flight and a drop in economic activity, which, coupled with Chinese sanctions, will have a cumulative effect. The pressure campaign is likely to take place in view of upcoming political events such as Taiwan's November 26 local elections and January 2024 general elections. In the coming period, the PRC will finally decide whether there are chances to achieve a peaceful reunification of the island and the mainland. If Beijing decides that there is no chance, then an attempt to annex Taiwan by force will become inevitable in accordance with China's 2005 anti-separatism law. The most important thing to understand now is that the war will not start today or tomorrow. Only, as they say in America, an alternatively gifted person, in Russian simply idiot, can think that the largest amphibious operation since the Second World War will be made dependent on the schedule of Nancy Pelosi. But in the next few years, war is extremely likely. And this will be an event of catastrophic proportions for the entire global economy. The consequences of this war will be felt not just by every country, but probably by every household in the world.